So here we are, the midway point. It is only a 5-episode run, but let's talk about Black Mirror Season 6, Episode 3, Beyond the Sea. First thing I want to talk about is my crazy out there theory that Charlie Brooker's being controlled by Netflix to make stuff even though he doesn't want to. In looking stuff up for this episode, I have found the genuine reason, but I'm going to leave that until the last episode, because I think how that ends really reinforces that point. Does that mean I'm going to give up my crazy theory crafting and provide evidence for it? No. In this episode, we have the idea of someone taking the form that someone else is known for, their body, and doing things with it that they wouldn't agree, or doing things with it and hiding the truth from them, getting other people involved who maybe don't realise that it might not be the real one, and that kind of thing. And you could bring into my theory of Charlie Brooker feeling like Black Mirror is now this thing that other people want to control and, go and do the oil painting while he's stuck in space exercising. But this is an interesting direction for Black Mirror. Whilst it is possibly the last Black Mirror-like episode of this run, the next two definitely lean into paranormal things. I don't like the term supernatural. If they exist, they are part of nature, therefore they cannot be supernatural. I know some people probably disagree with that, but that's how I look at it. But it is technology. We do something similar in some ways to San Junipero by going into the past. However, San Junipero was just a virtual version of 1980s. This is clearly an alternate history. A space mission that would take 6 years to go wherever they're going. Strange that this is Season 6 of Black Mirror. But the idea that whilst they're in space, so that their families won't miss them, so that they can interact with people while still on mission, they have these replicas. I like it. It's very Be Right Back. It's very, these things do crop up in Black Mirror a lot. The idea of fake versions of people or alternate versions of people and what that means. It's almost like a ship of Theseus. If you replace all of the planks in a boat, in a ship, is that still the same ship? And then if you took all the planks from that one that were kind of fine, but you just needed to update it, you could repair them and put them in a different ship. If all of them are now in this other ship, is that the ship of Theseus? This idea of what makes a thing, how much of the thing can be removed before it is the same thing or not. And yeah, this episode does lean into that in a way, with the fact that Cliff, or Cliff's replica at a point in the episode, is controlled by someone who's not Cliff, by David. And yeah, these philosophical things are what makes Black Mirror very interesting to me, as well as, like I said, the technological trappings that give that a voice, if you will, give it a platform to come out. But there's a lot of interesting seeds of things here as well. The fact that the episode is called Beyond the Sea, but we only hear La Mer by Charles Trenet instead of Beyond the Sea by Bobby Darin. But it reinforces the theme of the episode. La Mer was the original and is a love letter to the sea, specifically. It's very much, it's called the sea, it's about the sea. Very imaginative. But the anglicised version that most people probably know in the English-speaking world, maybe if you watch The X-Files, but that version is a love story. It's more romance than about the sea. But the tune and everything's the same. So it's something that seems familiar. Everything looks right, but something's not quite translated well. Is that a perfect reflection of this episode? We have Cliff's form, but David controlling it. We know what it should be, but it's not quite. And I do love that. I love so much in this episode the foreshadowing of the Manson-like group, led wonderfully by Rory Culkin, who can do creepy better than his brother, I would say, actually. Something about him just does lean into that, and maybe that was the whole Scream thing as well. It really helps cement this idea that he can do that role well. But they are great, and also we have the White Bear link. They do paint the symbol. Could it be tangentially related? The fact that they think they're doing justice by getting rid of this unnatural thing. I do understand where they're coming from. To have something unnatural is upsetting to some people, fine, and people rail against it. That's fine and understandable. But killing the family feels wrong until they explain why. Because they consent to this, they agree to this fake version of David being in their home, and whatever he does with them, that's unnatural. I understand it. It doesn't mean I have to agree with it. I'm not justifying it at all. But I can see how they can make that leap of logic of sorts. There is a wonderful moment as well that I caught, and I did put a note about how there's music early on during the sort of spacewalk setup, like the EVA suiting up. Feels very Halloween-y. And of course, Josh Hartnett was in H2O. I just think it's maybe an accidental or weird coincidence, but it did jump out at me. But there's a great theme here of knowing someone but not, like I said earlier on. And there are people who have traumatic brain injury or neurological conditions who will wake up one day seeming like a different person. Obviously people with multiple personalities as well. And it can be very hard on partners and things like that. I think this handles that idea quite well as well, because it is difficult. Everything feels like it should be one way, but something just doesn't click. But there's a lot of manipulation that is clear from David here. I mean, I've seen comments saying it's very much like a biblical thing that David lusting after Bathsheba, I believe. I can't remember entirely. Someone will correct me. It's been a while since I've done Bible stuff. But looking at it the second time before recording this, seeing little things like, was this a setup? Is this all trying to get what he wants out of it? Whilst it's... I do think it starts from a genuine place of thank you for allowing me to have a life that isn't just on the space station. Whilst I said earlier it's good for the families to have them around, it's also good for them to have a normal life outside of just being on mission. For 6 years, it's going to take a toll. It takes a toll for astronauts even for less time than that, because it's very different and you have got to get used to it. But things such as even saying, have you got any linseed oil? Knowing that she'd probably look in a cupboard. I mean, again, just my theory. But she's going to look in the cupboard, which means she's going to stretch and turn so you can have an idea of what her body is like. I don't think there's a breach of trust. I don't think she ever actually posed. When we see the sketches, the face is clearly the most detailed. Everything else is rough. It's very much like I guess it would look like that. Based on how I've seen her, how she turns and everything like that, I can imagine her body proportions a little better, and obviously copying a feel at one point he can get an idea of that, but he's not going to know everything. So the face is always the most detailed, and that's something I definitely picked up on. Is Cliff wrong for going at Lana, like he does, and kind of being like, well, what did you do with him? I do think he is, but at the time, we've got to remember, women weren't seen quite in the same way they are now, and them having bodily autonomy, although that's a whole issue that I'm not going to touch right now, but that kind of thing, like them being their own person, wasn't quite there yet. So whilst I'm not agreeing with Cliff doing it, I can understand it given the contemporary values. But I do think it was very harsh, and it took a while, I think, for him to go, no, this is not right, and David is the problem. But there was a moment when he goes back and he's being very, very aggressive with him. It's like, no, it's my wife, you're never going back there. I think that's the moment that clicks in David's head of, fine. There's a moment earlier on when it's like, you can't understand what I've had to deal with. There is no way you can totally understand and get it because you haven't lived that experience. Again, totally understandable, I agree. But this was the push, I believe. Like, not being able to attend the funeral because your replica was also destroyed. That's going to crush him. That's just one big moment that's carved away a hole in the heart, as well as obviously losing the family, but not being able to grieve in a normal way. So every little thing adds up. Having that life of normality potentially coming back, pushing it a little far because he doesn't get that she's seeing Cliff. There's a whole interchange of,
I know the way you look at me.
And you?
It's not at him, it's at Cliff. She's looking at her husband, and there will be moments where she forgets that he's not being piloted, if you will, by the person she married. But like I say, that end bit, I think all of these little things that just mount up over the episode That was the last push. You're never going to go back there. You can't say goodbye. You can't finish your painting. You can't do any of that. I think that was the moment. He's like, right, I said earlier, you don't understand what I've gone through. I'm going to make you understand. And maybe you'd realise how good you have it. There is an element that unsettles me, though. Well, a lot of it about that ending. But there's a particular bit where it's said a couple of times where it's a two-man mission. They know, they both need to be available and capable to do the mission. During the ending bit, when he sort of says, oh, there's something in the coolant, go outside, I was like, is he going to space him? Because he can't run the ship by himself. Is this like a weird murder-suicide, I guess you'd say? I don't know if I can use those words, but I'll deal with the consequences. But it's one of those situations where that was a thought that I had. Is it going to be that dark? But no, it's fine. He comes back, gets him in, and then the whole thing drops. When you realise that he has made it clear, this is what I had to live with. This is what I had to deal with. You were trying to be nice and you snatched it away. I'm going to do the same. I've seen people complain about the ending because it doesn't resolve. It's just the pushing out of the chair and he stood there all upset. We don't see what happens. But Black Mirror does this a lot. Black Mirror is great at, here's some stuff and we're going to resolve some things, but we want you to go away with this in your mind and you to draw your own conclusions. We want to put these thoughts on you. Everything that could happen at the end, that's in your mind. And I totally respect that. I enjoy it more because I feel this is one of the best episodes of this run because of that. It doesn't just cleanly close out. Whilst I enjoyed the ending of Joan is Awful, it was much more light-hearted. And, other episodes that I've enjoyed have their own ways of ending things and leaving thoughts in your mind, but I do like this. This whole, right, now we're on a level playing field. Let's sit down. Let's get this mission done. I mean, we don't know. They might just both jettison themselves out of airlocks. It's all up to you. It can be as dark or as light as you want. And that, to me, is the core of Black Mirror. It's leaving you with thoughts to chew on. And, yeah, I really enjoyed this. And it's nice to see people like Josh Hartnett, who I don't see much of. I don't watch a lot of the independent stuff that he's probably doing in between. So I tend to just see him at various points, and he's always a delight to me. Aaron Paul, like I said, coming back. Also in the space episode, the double dipping again. Everyone here does a really good job, and it is what Black Mirror should be. Like I say, it's going to change. The next two episodes go in a vastly different direction. And I definitely have thoughts about them. It's just they're going to be quite different. So I hope you'll join me for both of those, and then whatever's coming over the summer. So thank you very much for letting me talk about this, as always, and until next time, take care. And are you sure you're you?